Hey everybody, it's the Ioniq guy. You might be wondering what vehicle I'm sitting in right now. Well, I'm sitting in my mother's 2012 Ford Fusion. This is her car, but my fiance is going to be taking this car with her in her move to Minneapolis for the next year, just because her Kona Electric is already getting high up in the mileage and we're kind of pushing the lease terms. So my mother, who doesn't drive very much, is going to take it, and my fiance is going to take this Ford Fusion. Now the problem is she's gotten really used to her Kona Electric over the last couple years, and she's really gonna miss having a touchscreen with a backup camera and Apple CarPlay. So that brings me to today's video. About a year ago, I got an email from a company called Carpuride. Now, Carpuride makes these little screens that mount to your car's dashboard, and they provide you with Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and in my instance, a backup camera. And at the time I said, I got a brand new car. My fiance has a brand new car. We both have touchscreens in our cars, so this doesn't really do us any good. But fast forward to a year from then, and now we actually have a use for it. So I reached back out to Carpuride, and they sent me over this screen right here. Now, I'm going to tell you guys all about it in today's video. I'm going to show you the installation that I did here on the Ford Fusion and give you some ideas for how you might want to mount it in your car. So if you have an aging car that doesn't have a touchscreen that supports Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, this might be the product for you. So stay tuned if you want to find out more. So like I mentioned, this car is a 2012 Ford Fusion, has no touchscreen. Oddly enough, I did own a 2012 Ford Fusion SEL that did have Sync 2 in it, which was just an awful operating system from way back when. I think they developed that in like 2010. So super outdated. Even if you had it, you probably wouldn't want to use it anymore. So this could work for a car that even has a really old touchscreen that doesn't support any of the fancy new CarPlay or Android Auto features. So the installation I chose to do here is a little different than most people are probably going to do. But if you've ever seen one of these Ford Fusions from 2 generations ago, it had this flip-up lid in the center of the dashboard. So I said, you know what, this seems like the most logical place to mount the Carpuride because I can mount it low on the dashboard so it's not blocking any visibility out of the windshield. So what I did is I took this whole piece out of the front of the car and I took the actual lid off of this cubby, and now I have a plate screwed into this cubby here, which mounts the arm for the Carpuride nice and low. And actually it works out well because this will run a little bit hot, so I can have some air blowing on it from the vent right here. So I think that is a good place for it to be. Installation was super simple. I mounted the arm, mounted the Carpuride to the arm, plugged in the 12-volt cigarette lighter adapter to the Carpuride, and then the fun part started, and that was taking apart the trunk and installing the backup camera. So that was a bit of a challenge. It just took a little bit of time. It wasn't super complicated. It was just routing the wire, making sure everything was wrapped in electrical tape so that it's not going to rub, waterproofing the hole that I drilled in the trunk for the wire to go through. I used some butyl tape, which I've used on my teardrop camper in the past for waterproofing. It's amazing stuff. Really good for waterproofing, so I highly recommend if you're going to do this and install the backup camera, have a little bit of butyl tape on hand because it's a lot easier than using like a silicone caulk. You just kind of mold it with your fingers, pack it up where it needs to be water tightened, and that's pretty much it. So after I had all the panels in the trunk pulled apart, it came time to run the wire up to the dashboard. So I ran it along the driver's side of the car. I ran it down low along the door sill under the plastic trim, up under the steering column, and then right up here to the Carpuride. Before I plugged it in, I did have to tap into the passenger reverse light. So I used these little inline T-splices to take the positive side, I believe, of the reverse lamp, and then the ground obviously went to the frame of the car. And then I was ready to plug it into the Carpuride. I plugged it in, put the car in reverse, and it worked perfectly. So in less than an hour, this 12-year-old Ford Fusion now has a backup camera. It is pretty responsive. So I am using the Carpuride by broadcasting a radio signal to the car. You could use a 3.5mm headphone jack to go from the Carpuride to the 3.5mm input if your car has it. This car does have it, but I didn't want to have another cable coming down the front here, so I'm just broadcasting it. I have had issues in the past with cars this old that have the 3.5mm input, that sometimes you will get some sort of noise induced into the sound system, so I like to just use the FM transmitter function. It works well enough. I've got Waze working here. It's not a super big screen. It's only about 7 inches, so it's really not much bigger than a phone screen. But my fiance, her phone is an iPhone mini, so hers is much smaller than this screen. And it's just nice to have something dedicated on the dashboard. You don't have to worry about sticking your phone up there. And there is no longer Apple CarPlay available on the iPhone itself. It only uses an external screen for Apple CarPlay now. You used to be able to use CarPlay as a standalone application itself on your phone, but you can't do that anymore, unfortunately. This obviously also has Apple CarPlay. You can put a thumb drive into the USB port on the side if you want to just have a bunch of music stored on it. FM transmitter is where you can pick which station you want to broadcast to, and depending on the strength of these stations, you might want to try around and see which one sounds the best in your location. So I'll go ahead, throw the car in reverse, and you can see almost instantaneously it switches to the backup camera, which is nice. I like how quickly it works. It's not the most high resolution backup camera, but you know what? It's better than no backup camera at all, in my opinion. And then when you switch back into drive, it immediately disappears. I think my biggest complaint is that this does not turn off if your phone disconnects from it. And in this instance, the 12-volt outlet down here never powers off. So as long as this is plugged in, this will run and run and run until the battery of the car dies. So I really don't like that. I wish that if this sensed that nothing was connected to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, that it would just power this screen off. So what I went ahead and did, I ordered a extension cable from Amazon, and it has an inline voltmeter, and if it senses the battery voltage drops below 11 volts, it will turn this outlet off and turn this off completely. So hopefully that prevents any dead batteries in the cold Minnesota mornings. I am a little worried about it. It's just too much hassle to try and find a circuit in here that turns off with the car and tee into that. I don't want to start messing around with the wiring under the dashboard. So I'm going to see if this little adapter works. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well, if you have a car that has 12 volts that are always powered on. So I gotta say, I actually do like this product. If you have an older car and you want to bring it into the 21st century a little bit, this is a great option. This 2012 Ford Fusion doesn't have any screen anywhere down here. As you can see, it's just this small little screen that displays radio stations. So I really do like that I now have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto up here. I know my fiance is really going to appreciate having the backup camera because she's had her Kona Electric for a couple years now, and she has gotten really used to the backup camera. So she's excited to have that. So flashing forward a couple months, we moved her out there in the middle of June, and it was a pretty uneventful trip. The device worked just as good as I expected it to. The wireless connection through the FM transmitter was super stable. The wireless connection between my phone and the Carpuride was also very stable. I didn't have any dropped connections or anything. The 12-volt battery didn't drain, but that's because we got into the habit of just unplugging it or using the button on the side of it to power it down when we were going to be away from the car for a bit. The screen is pretty clear. Glare doesn't really affect it very much. So I'll leave a link in the description below if you guys are interested in picking one up for your older car. But yeah, it's got high praise from me. If you've got an older car, this could definitely be a good option for you. So anyway, guys, if you liked today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.